Good evening, everybody. This video may seem a little odd, especially if you are one of the people who watched a similar video from me last year. This is a remake of it. Now you may ask, "Oh, Snake Solid, why are you remaking this video? You already made it before." Well, the answer to that is very simple. That video sucks ass, and I wanted to make a new one that updated my rankings a small bit, as well as a video to show how far I've come as a content creator this year. Now, before we cover the Ambassador Program games, let's talk about the program itself. The Ambassador Program was a series of free NES and GBA games that Nintendo gave people as an apology for those who had bought a 3DS when it was a whopping $250. Mind you, this isn't the new 3DS or the 3DS XL, it was a regular 3DS. I was one of the people to actually get this program, and it helped me spread out in terms of my gaming taste, as well as gave me a way to play one of my all-time favorite games on my 3DS. Just a reminder before we begin, this list is based off of my personal preference and enjoyment of these games. So don't be mad at me when I rank F-Zero low again. So join me as I re-rank the Ambassador Program games. Let's get started. Yeah, no, there was no way that Yoshi would stop being the absolute worst game on this list. For just a lot of irritating design choices, the game's not really that fun. It's just a boring puzzle game about matching 3 enemies and fitting them all inside of an egg. It's far too simple to be any fun for me, or any adult for that matter, making me just kind of bored until I just don't care enough to stay alive. I replayed this for about 20-ish minutes before I had to stop. It's not just bland and boring, it's also on a console that has access to Tetris and Dr. Mario, which are just infinitely better puzzle games. It's still at the bottom of the list, and it will always be there. All I have else to say is that I still feel like Mario in this picture. The Ambassador Program certificate holds much more value than Yoshi on the NES. I am dead serious here. At least with the Ambassador Program certificate, I can feel like I have something of value at least. I was itching for a way to put Yoshi on the NES even lower than it already was. And you know what? I found my way. Fuck Yoshi on the NES. All my homies hate Yoshi on the NES. That's all. This game simply holds more value than that game by being here. That's how much I hate Yoshi on the NES. NES Open Golf Tournament is a perfectly standard sports game for the console. It has the standard amount of modes that you'd expect from a golf game on the console. There isn't much more to cover on that front. You choose a mode, you pick a club, and you choose a power and direction and send the ball flying. There's other things that factor into the direction of the ball, like the wind, and that's perfectly fine. Not much more than fine. It's not really my type of game to choose, if I'm being honest. It's not like the other Mario sports games where it's a Mario game that has golf. This game is a golf game that just so happens to have Mario in it, and that's fine, but it also kind of puts me to sleep, if I'm being honest. It still doesn't make me want to die, which is why when I'm playing it. So therefore, it is automatically above Yoshi on the NES. One last fun fact that I want to share. Mario's best Smash Bros. Ult comes from this game. That's all. Perfectly fine game, but I'm not going to be replaying it ever again after this video. Alright, so remember when I started the video and said this list would be based on my personal enjoyment? Well, not saying this game is bad or anything, but I have a hard time enjoying F-Zero games. The game series is a high-speed racing game with lots of sharp turns and danger, where you can sacrifice some of your health in exchange for speed. When replaying it this time, I really just realized the type of game is just not for me. I have never really been too big on racing games. All in all, it's a good game, but if we're going by my personal opinion, then I can't really put it much higher. So don't take this as a sign of the quality of the game. Instead, take that as an info why I am super uncultured and you should not take my opinion into consideration. These next handful will be a lot of the arcadey NES games in a row. These games are fun and enjoyable, I guess, kinda. But in my experience, they kinda just blend together. When choosing which of these would be my least favorite, I would probably have to go with Donkey Kong Jr. Donkey Kong Jr. is the sequel to the arcade classic Donkey Kong. You play as well. Donkey Kong Jr., it's pretty basic and self-explanatory. But the game's just a game of getting up to the top with some things like climbing and avoiding enemies. It's pretty samey with the repeating stages. As like with Donkey Kong, there are 3 stages that repeat on end. Once you get through it, once you've seen everything the game has to offer, at least with the other games like this, you get around like, I don't know, but you get more variation on the stages you get, so for that reason I'll have to rank it lower than the rest for sure. This game is kind of a weird one for me. On one hand, the controls feel loose, and the collision on the edges of the platform is really god-awful. But on the other hand, I do like the platforming here much more than the platforming in Donkey Kong Jr., and the gameplay of chiseling away at the bottom of the platforms keeps me a little bit engaged so I don't feel brain dead. Pair this with a simple hammer move for offensive capabilities, and you've spiced up the gameplay a lot more than Donkey Kong Jr. could ever hope to have. The movement here kind of reminds me of arcade Mario Bros. Movements, and the eggplant minigame gives me war flashbacks to the coin minigame from the same thing. It's not a great game or even a good one. It's honestly just eh. It goes above Donkey Kong Jr. based on the variety alone as well as the gameplay. But you really should just not. That's kind of the theme of a lot of games on this part of the list. Balloon Fight is still a pretty basic game, but I can at least say it has more to offer than the last couple of entries on the list. For one, the controls feel much better. And the gameplay is a lot more interesting, with you having to fight against what looks like bird people, or Chozo, by bursting their balloons and then kicking them to their death, where they will be eaten by a fish violently. It also has this challenge to go as far as you can on a balloon trip. I'm kind of grasping at straws to say about as much of the game as I can. But I do get small bits of enjoyment from the simple gameplay of popping and kicking enemies to their death. This has more potential for fun with the ability for multiplayer. However, that would be a little bit unfair to use as a reason since the 3DS Virtual Console didn't allow for multiplayer. All in all, it's kind of a mediocre game, and you should still just play the Game Boy Color version of this. That's much more of a complete game if you like this type of gameplay. Yeah. This is still the best arcade NES game on the Ambassador Program list. It's more fun and fast than the others, with a fun gimmick. That is breaking shit. The game tasks you with going from level to level, breaking all of the breakable objects whilst avoiding the purple guys that follow you around. Each level is also like a small puzzle where you must navigate Mario through the stages in such a specific way that you can bust up everything. You also fight against Mario's boss in some stages as you go through busting these locker things until you find the coin. It's like a little race. But if the levels the game has to offer you aren't really your cup of tea, well then I have just the news to tell you. Wrecking Crew has a built-in level creator that you can build your very own level for Mario to walk through. That automatically puts it above literally every other arcade game that was on the NES, like even outside of this list. But I'll be completely honest, if not for this video, I would never ever have played these games again. But it's a game that has care. But it's a game that has a character that looks like Waluigi, so that justifies its existence completely on its own. But now that we're done with that, let's get to the games that are actually games with a purpose and a goal in them. Shall we? Man, I really do not like Metroid on the NES. But boy, do I really like Metroid, the series. This game is the first game in the Metroid series, but unlike a lot of other first games in other Nintendo series, it has a lot of awkward stuff that it needed to work out. For one, the game has a lot of issues with reusing the same rooms over and over and over again, making a lot of the level design feel very samey and forgettable. It's incredibly easy to get lost in this game, and not in the fun way people generally like to get lost in a Metroid game. Another issue with the game is just the way that the upgrades work. While most of the upgrades do stack, the beam upgrades do not. There are 3 beam upgrades in Metroid on the NES, the long beam, the ice beam, and the wave beam. This game stacks the long beam on the other 2, however, ice and wave do not stack at all. This normally wouldn't be an issue, only a small annoyance. However, you need the ice beam to kill the Metroids in the last area of the game. This means the game expects you to take one and not the other, and the game does not convey this at all. The game also does not run well, with several graphical and audio errors, which leads to the break in immersion. Normally I wouldn't bring this up, but with Metroid it happens extremely often. But to give it a small amount of credit, I do actually dig the music and the weird alien way the graphics look. It's very alien, and I mean that in a very positive way. It was such a unique look that games like Axiom Verge would actually center its graphics around the odd way Metroid looks. I would recommend if you wanted to play this game, just play Metroid Zero Mission. Even playing this game with a guide is miserable. It's painful and just feels like a beta to a Metroid game. The only thing here that I can really note is the superior suit with Samus design. That's about it though. Yeah. The first installment of the Zelda series was not really all that good, if I'm being honest, but it has some fun quirks and an old charm. Since it's a Zelda game, you have to scour Hyrule to find a bunch of dungeons to save Zelda from the evil clutches of Ganon, which the game misspells. I do sometimes miss seeing misspellings like this in old NES games. Anyways, the game has the standard things that you'd come to expect from a Zelda game. Lots of secrets, items, and dungeons, but seeing as it's both an old NES game and the first Zelda game in the series, it feels very archaic and clunky to say the least. And the fact that it starts you with 3 hearts whenever you respawn or load a save file regardless of what your max health is makes me groan. It's part of those anti-player practices that these games do a lot of from this era. However, unlike Metroid on the NES, The Legend of Zelda does not come off as confusing and unfair, and the grind to get back to full health is not nearly as awful as Metroid on the NES. An issue that this game shares with Metroid on the NES, though, is that it's very vague on what you need to do, to the point of where you really need a guide to figure out or enjoy anything about this game whatsoever. And this game is kinda worse than that with Metroid, but unlike Metroid, there is something enjoyable about the amount of secrets hidden in this world. There's a lot of memorable stuff in this game too. This game doesn't reuse level geometry like Metroid does, but there's other stuff that's memorable, like using the raft to get to the dungeon or the gambling game. And this is a lot for an NES game, and to be honest, if I got this as a little kid, I would probably be stoked about all the stuff in it. All in all, I'm happy to be getting to better games on the list, but this game isn't really anything too special if I'm being honest. Well, if it isn't my boringly average friend Mario Kart Super Circuit on the Nintendo Game Boy Advance. I'll be completely honest, this game did get a bit worse for me on replay in a lot of ways. The track design bored me more than it did before, the controls weren't enjoyable for me, and the character variety is just not there. I honestly don't have much to say besides the fact that almost every track in this game has been reused in other Mario Kart games and are better in those games. So what does that tell you? The game is pretty bad. The only thing I can really give it is that the Mode 7 look has its charm, and the sprites are neat. But that doesn't really do much for me, and this isn't just a, this type of game isn't for me, like with F-Zero. I just think that this game is really bad. Just play Mario Kart DS or any other game aside from Super Mario Kart. This gets put up so high on the list, if you're wondering, because it is at least straightforward and doesn't require a guide. Moving on. Well, this game is notorious as hell as being a black sheep within the game series. Zelda 2 is a huge departure from the first game in the series in a lot of ways. They have taken the top-down aspect of the series and instead went for a side-view one, as well as the fact that there are not as many tools to use. No bows, no magic wands, it's just the sword and the shield. Every item that you get is simply a switch that gets flipped. However, what you lack in items, you get in moveset variety and magic. You once again travel Hyrule to save Zelda again. This time from a curse. You must retrieve different parts of the Triforce so you can awaken her. You travel from a top-down perspective, and while this happens, Ganon's minions spawn to try and kill you. Yes, kill. The game's manual specifies that they want to use Link's blood to resurrect Ganon, which is, that's a bit wild for an NES game, to say the least. When a minion attacks Link, you fight in a 2D stage against them. It's an odd balance, to say the least. When you kill enough enemies, Link actually levels up and will either get more health, attack, or more magic, which is essentially required to finish the game, as the enemy damage output gets higher and higher as the game progresses and becomes increasingly more annoying. There are good parts, of course. It has other parts of the series that would eventually become standard, such as Link learning techniques and magic from tutors, but I wouldn't recommend it, honestly. This game gets much worse as it goes on, especially with the enemy balance and placement. And the fact that running out of lives sends you right back to the starting temple, causing you to waste time returning to the place where you had lost previously. All of these issues really make the game not worth playing, which does suck because the game reminds me of Shovel Knight. I'm not the only one who could see a Shovel Knight-like fan game of Zelda 2, right? And if I'm being honest, I wouldn't recommend any of the games up to this one on the list, since a lot of them are just below average to me, but the good thing is that for the next 9 games, we kind of, have bangers. So let's stop wasting our time right now and get directly to the bangers. This is a bit weird. I actually prefer Super Mario Bros. On the NES to any of the games on this list up until this point. It's something that a lot of other games are not. Fun and straightforward. A lot of these games up till now have had huge flaws that required effort on my part to overcome. Either the bullshit enemies in Zelda 2, the need for a guide in Zelda 1 and Metroid, the awful controls in Donkey Kong Jr., or the samey boring level designs that plagued all of the arcade titles. This game, on the other hand, defined and created the platform genre, and saved the gaming industry as a whole. So it only makes sense that it's this high on the list. I won't act like this game is a super amazing game by today's standards, but it does hold up quite well. All in all, this game is a perfect middle point for this list, because while all the games up till now may have been or meh, this game and all of them below are games that I think that you should play. Let's get to the really good ones, because the quality shoots up from here. Yoshi's Island on the Nintendo Game Boy Advance is the exact opposite of Yoshi on the Nintendo Entertainment System. It's an actually good experience that leaves me with a big ol' smile on my face. This game was an odd game to title Super Mario World 2, because the game shares very little with Super Mario World aside from the characters and the fact that it's a platformer. This game does a lot to forge its own identity, with reintroducing Shy Guys, giving Yoshi a new moveset about fluttering and throwing eggs, and even creating new enemies for it. You'd be surprised that it takes a few worlds to actually see a Koopa or a Goomba. This game also did not have to attach itself to any other Mario game to be good. It's actually one of the best platformers under the Mario umbrella, with excellent controls, a fun moveset for Yoshi, and level design that encourages you to act fast. I found myself on the edge of my seat as I ran through these levels. Do not let the stunning visuals and bombastic music fool you. This game is actually really, really hard, and the later stages force you to keep on your toes for the latter half. You may be surprised at the absolute insanity of the levels at points. It really is sad no other game in the Yoshi's Island series has matched or surpassed this game ever. It's not my favorite platform on this list, but don't take that as a testament as how bad it is. Take it as a testament as all these other games are just really, really good. That should clue you into the opinion of the rest of this list. Mario vs. Donkey Kong is a slightly worse version of Donkey Kong 94, which by that I mean it's still an incredibly good game despite that. Mario vs. Donkey Kong is the spiritual successor to that game, and in it, Donkey Kong steals a bunch of Mario's merchandise from his toy line, the Mini Marios. This leads to Mario having to climb through stages and solve puzzles to recover his assets, which he does, of course, because if there's anything that will get Mario on your ass, it's stealing his money. Mario's moveset is the same as Donkey Kong 94, with a side flip, triple jump, and handstand. I do have to say, while this is still fun, I still do think that this game doesn't go hard enough with the stage themes. Donkey Kong 94 had you go from the city, to the jungle, to a boat, to the Arctic, to Egypt, and finally a tower. In comparison, the stage themes here are quite safe. It's still fun, though, and I really do like the identity it forges through the pre-rendered graphics and the music, as it gives it a look similar to the DKC games, and the voice clips, combined with the music, also add a lot too. It's a similar game to Donkey Kong 94, but it feels a lot different due to these changes. This game would have been much higher if the level editor had been in it, because did you know that there's actually a level editor in the code of this game? You can get it by hacking or by doing a glitch with the Game Boy player, and yeah, why isn't this in the game? This would have been sick, but bad Nintendo decisions aside, I still think that this game is fantastic and deserves your time, level editor or not. It would have been a lot higher on the list though. Nintendo, when you add it to Nintendo Switch Online, you know what the ad. WARIO is straight up one of the most replayable games on this list. The amount of fun this game provides is unreal. It's very replayable. The game's main gameplay is picking a stage and playing through a handful of microgames, ending with a small boss stage. These games get faster and faster and faster as you successfully complete games. You have the ability to fail only a small amount of games before you lose. You have 3 lives before you die. You know, your last one not really being an extra life, it's just your last life. After beating a stage, you can also replay it to see how far you can go in before you lose all your lives. A big part of this game's charm is the framing of each of these chapters. In this game, Wario wants to create a video game, and since video games make a ton of money, that seems like a good option for him. So Wario, being Wario, goes to open a game company and employs all of his friends to create a game, introducing a wide series of friends for Wario, as well as further expanding the Mario universe. This story is very simple, but each stage starts with a little introduction story about the characters inside of them to sort of set the scene, like Mona running from the cops to get to work on time, a taxi ride and dribble stages, or running to go to the bathroom Dr. Kragura's stage. These stories add a ton of fun to the game's weird factor and help characterize the characters that populate Diamond City. This game is also dripping with that Wario charm. You know, the visuals and sound, and they all just scream Wario. And honestly, that's kind of what makes Wario games good, honestly. I would be completely okay with there being a Wario version of every genre. Where's the Wario first-person shooter, Nintendo? Especially since it has a ton of personality. Fun fact about the original video on the Ambassador program. I actually forgot to edit in the footage for this section during the Wario section. Like, go back and look at it. It's really embarrassing. It's just me talking with a scrolling background for like 15 minutes, and it's like stay solid. You stop. I'm literally screaming at myself in the past right now. It's a bit embarrassing, but pretty funny to point out. And here we are. We are right back down to the last 5 Ambassador Program games. Now, these games are some of my most replayed games from the GBA library, and while I have you here, I wanted to thank everyone who's made it this far in the video. And if anyone's seen that original Ambassador Program video, I want to thank all of you for sticking with me over the last year. My production has gone up a lot of as late, and I hope you all continue to watch. Now, without further ado, let's get down to these last 5 games on this list. Each one of these games I'm about to cover are ones you absolutely must try if you're a fan of the GBA. No collection is complete without any of these last 5. And if I'm being honest with you, it's a bit of a lie to say that these are my most replayed games on the console's library. These are actually some of my most replayed games of all time, so let's get into it, because we have a video to finish. Yeah, you're probably looking and saying, oh shit, the video's like only halfway done. Yeah, these are going to be a doozy. Out of all of the Ambassador Program games I've covered, with the exception of one other game, Legend of Zelda Minish Cap is the game that took me the longest to finish on my first playthrough of it. Due to the nature of this game being an adventure game with puzzles, my stupid ass could not figure it out at all and got stuck in several places for months on end. I remember getting excited every time I found a way forward. This game was a huge part of my childhood, as it took me over 6 months to complete, and I've replayed it a ton of times, but let's talk about what this game is all about in the first place. Minish Cap is a very unique feeling game for the Game Boy Advance, honestly, with its unique music and odd sprites reminiscent of Wind Waker. This game gives a very unique feel to it. The NPCs also make sounds when you talk to them. It's small little details like that that make me like the game. This game is also one of those rare Zelda games that doesn't feature Ganon in any way whatsoever. This time, the game provides us with a new original villain that fills in for him. And in my opinion, he's one of the better villains to stand in for Ganon. The gameplay is reminiscent of the prior two handheld games, Oracle of Seasons and Oracle of Ages, giving Link the ability to freely remap your two action buttons to any item you'd like. But unlike those last two games, you don't have to equip permanent upgrades like the Power Bracelet to either of those. The game also gives you a lot of movement and battle options, with techniques that you learn from teachers, some of which are required and some of which of them are optional. I really like that inclusion from the 3D tiles, and it gives this game a lot more to work with. A lot of games in this series have an alternate world mechanic where Link visits another world or an alternate high version of Hyrule. And this game has one of those too, that being shrinking down to explore Hyrule. Hyrule is a lot smaller in this game than it is in any other one of the incarnations, and that's because the main gimmick is shrinking Link down to explore the tiny bits of the world. This is a very unique mechanic and a pretty cool aesthetic, and honestly it makes Minish Cap stand out quite a bit from the rest of the series. It's also just really fun to see in action. This game, while fun, is not perfect though, and as much as it hurts to say, getting 100% in this game is one of the most agonizing experiences I have ever had in gaming. First off is the Kingstone side quest. This side quest is not very well thought out, and the game doesn't do a good deal to explain the importance of doing it immediately. The side quest randomly chooses NPCs to fuse these rocks called Kingstones with, which in turn you must hunt down and fuse them with if you want to do the side quest. Doing this with them spawns random collectibles and other items across the game's world. This stuff counts for your completion score, and the game has no indication of how many of these you have completed or which NPCs you can fuse with. If you don't keep track of it, the game won't, and even worse is that only a small portion of these are available for the first part of the game, and if you don't complete them before a certain point in the story, you miss out on rewards for good, like the light arrow. And the biggest fuck you to the player is the last reward for this entire side quest being the Mirror Shield, which at this point you have nothing else to use on. It's a good bonus, but you can't use it anywhere effectively. But that's nothing compared to the Secret Cell side quest. This side quest tanked the game's completion enjoyment for me. I could not enjoy completing this game after I got to this point. This side quest is essentially a gacha game where you input shells to get these figurines. They're cute and all with little sprite art and little descriptions of what, it's depicting, but the issue is grinding for these secret shells is incredibly awful, and if you do it with money, then you'll be killing things forever, and if you grind directly for the shells, you'll be cutting grass and reloading rooms forever. And I do mean forever. It took me, at least a solid week and a half to do this after I had reached the end of the game. And you have to do this for the last piece of heart of the game, which means that this is required for 100%. I will never ever 100% this game ever again, since it was one of the worst games I have ever had the 100%. This game is good aside from that issue that I listed, but those issues are what keeps it from being any lower on the list than number 5. That's still a damn good ranking though, if I'm being completely honest. I'd say try it, but you shouldn't 100% complete it at all. Oh, fuck yeah, baby! I get to talk about Wario Land 4 again! Yippee! Oh, I am unbelievably happy to be able to say that Wario Land 4 on the Game Boy Advance SP is an excellent game, and that has gotten even better since I had played it last year. Everything about this game makes it the perfect stage-based platformer in the Ambassador program, bar none. As everyone has always been confused about, we never got a new Mario platformer, and you want to know why? That's because Wario Land is just better than any game Mario could hope to ever put out. Wario Land 4 is purely here, it would just be here, if we were looking at the gameplay and the atmosphere. But in addition to this game looking and sounding excellent and having extremely expressive sprite arts, it is just a good game. But the music is also really good. Songs like Hieroglyph Halls, Toy Block Tower, Hotel Horror, Crescent Village, The Escape Theme, hell, I adore most of the music, and the expressive pixel art is excellent. This game tasks you as Wario to go through stages in this pyramid to find treasure hidden inside after Wario is brought here by a strange black cat. This is the first Wario Land game since the first one where Wario can actually die. Wario still has the ability to transform from a lot of attacks, but he can actually take damage from others, and you have to be careful in a lot of these. As for aspects of the gameplay, Wario now has the ability to charge, in addition to his ground pound and shoulder bash, for if you want to be really speedy. I actually really like the flow and fun of this game. Collectibles aren't too out of the way, you just gotta keep your eyes peeled and stay on your toes for the stuff. You do need some of the collectibles to continue on the game, but the game always does a good job of putting these in good places for you to see as to not break the flow of gameplay. On top of all of this game has unique stage themes that you usually wouldn't see in a platformer. Like you have stage themes like a toy block tower, a giant pinball maze, racing dominoes, the Overlook Hotel, and actual hell. This combined with once again, the Wario charm, really making this one stand out, is what I think puts this super high on the list. I adore this game, and it's one of the most replayable games in the entirety of the Ambassador program, and you're really missing out if you aren't playing one of Wario's greatest achievements ever. So you're probably like, why is it at number 4? Well, motherfucker, it's Wario Land 4! Of course I'm gonna put it at 4 for the memes. It probably actually deserves to be like number 3 or 2, if I'm being honest, but hell yeah! Wario! I gotta win! Kirby and the Amazing Mirror is my personal favorite platform on the Ambassador program. It's very flawed, but it's the one true open Metrovania-style game on this list. That aside, Kirby and the Amazing Mirror, and most games from this era of Kirby, go off a great feeling of charm. When I hear the music in this game, I feel the same way as when a nice, pleasant, cool breeze blows past me on a hot summer day. It's very, very pleasant, like a warm bed on a cold night. The game does railroad you for the first area before branching out wildly in different directions after you beat the first boss, but if you know what you're doing, you can go all the way up to Area 9 earlier. I like the feeling of getting lost in this game. The theming of the game is also really neat too. A lot of the bosses in this game have fun parallels to other Kirby bosses. A good example is how the first boss is a parallel to Wispy Woods. Wiz is like Paint Roller, and that is just Krakow. Never mind, I'm just stupid, I guess. That being said, though, this game still has a lot of flaws. Progression can be annoying if you lose your ability onto a place with either an iron block or a hammer peg, since you lose your ability after a single hit. And the fact that outside of extra health, there aren't really more upgrades to find, and the 100% requirements can have the same issue Minish Cap can have at times. With you needing to open every single chest in the game, even the ones with generic items in it, and the game does not tell you about this, and the chests reclose after you leave and come back to the game. But I think there are enough positives to ignore that, especially since you don't miss out on a whole lot by avoiding 100%. It's not like Minish Cap, where you can miss out on the light arrows and the larger quiver and the bomb bags for not looking hard enough. Admittedly, it is nostalgia that made me rank this game so high. Wario Land 4 should really be at number 3, but you know, the joke with Wario Land 4, you know. But luckily, the last few entries on this list are completely objective. All in all, this game is excellent and makes me wish that Kirby would make another attempt at a Metroidvania-style game. I do wish it was better, but hey, we have a few more games left on this list, and I do think these last 2 games are objectively the best games on the Ambassador program. So let's not dally and get right to it, shall we? This is my favorite Metroid. Metroid Fusion is easily the most unique feeling Metroid in the entirety of the Metroid franchise. Metroid Fusion follows Samus after the events of Super Metroid, where she has a run-in with the dangerous X-Parasites when doing a mission on SR-388. This causes her to lose her upgrades due to needing to have her suit surgically removed, since it fuses with her. And for her to need to take a Metroid vaccine, all of these procedures completely changes her appearance, which is not something that happens in every single big Nintendo franchise. Metroid Fusion made a bold step in changing a ton about the series. Most games after 8 years would try to play it safe, usually making a game that's copying the last major success in the series. Metroid Fusion, on the other hand, did everything it could to change not just the Metroid formula, but the foundation and appearance of the franchise. It does its best to subvert what you expect about the series, rather than making it something that is a lesser version of Super Metroid, because if you can't do things better, then you have to set yourself apart by being different. And that's what Metroid Fusion does. I haven't even talked about the game yet though, so let's get right into the details. This game completely changes the physics and control style of Super. Gone are the floaty momentum-based movements. Samus is a lot quicker and snappy to control, giving you a lot more predictable movement and consistency. Aiming has also been streamlined to only use a single button, to aim up or down, freeing use of the other back button, which is for toggling on missiles or power bombs. I'm extremely glad that they did this, since switching through items with the select button is easily my least favorite part of the control scheme in Super Metroid. So far, all of these are good changes, but the next one is a little bit, per se, a little controversial. In an effort to set itself apart, Metroid Fusion removed the non-linearity of Super in favor of a more streamlined difficulty and story. I adore this completely, as it makes the game a lot more difficult to play through and feels a lot more like a challenge, since the developers could map out the player progression and make, a more challenging game. I like this change, but a lot of people don't. I love the X-Parasites, though. They're such a great villain, and the concept is absolutely terrifying. The way that they use the forms of the creatures they kill, as well as obtaining their knowledge and skills, is terrifying. A lot of the game feels weird and artificial, and it's definitely the intention. The environments are simulated, the creatures are just mimicking existing animals, and dear lord, that sound effect that plays when they're inside of the room with you makes my skin crawl every time. They even changed how you restored missiles and health to collecting X-Parasites, since Samus can eat them after taking the vaccine. This game does lose a lot of replayability, but it feels a lot more special than a lot of games in the series because of how unique it feels. It is for sure not the best Metroid. Hell, it's not even the best Metroid on the console. Zero Mission is a lot better and replayable, but something that Fusion has for me that Zero Mission does not have is its atmosphere and its horror, since at times Metroid Fusion can feel like a horror experience. The body horror here is real and disgusting, but I like it. This game is wonderful, and it's one of the most unique games in the series. You need to play this. If you own a GBA, you're doing yourself a disservice, because Metroid Fusion is an experience. I could go on, but we have a list to conclude. And this last one, once again, it shouldn't be a surprise to any of the people watching this. Let's get on to the last one on the list. One year later, and what do I think? Well, this year was pretty hard to be a Fire Emblem fan, admittedly. Our anniversary game was absolutely boring and fell off right away. Nobody talks about it, and it's only been less than a year. And it always constantly seemed like Intelligent Systems cared more about Fire Emblem Heroes than anything in the main series. Earlier this year, my enthusiasm as a fan was absolutely shattered to the point in which I debated with myself if Fire Emblem 8 was really as good as the place I hold it dearly, and as I replayed all of these games for this list, I grew anxious as we got towards Fire Emblem 8. I wanted to play Fire Emblem 8 last, since it easily is the longest game on this list, and I was nervous. But as I played Fire Emblem 8, I slowly started smiling as it became clear that I still love this game just as much as I ever have. Every time I play Fire Emblem 8, I'm drawn into something new that I hadn't paid attention to before. A new plot point I didn't realize I loved, or in this year's case, a new character that I grew attached to. Last year, I didn't quite know how to make good videos or make scripts that could express exactly how I felt, but over the course of this last year, I've learned how to express myself a lot better. So this is it. This segment will be more of what the game means to me, so let's get into it. To me, Fire Emblem 8 symbolizes hope. It's a game that I've always had access to. Even in the darkest parts of my life, I have had my Fire Emblem 8 cartridge with me. and when I got the Ambassador program, it was even more accessible. The characters go through so much in this game, and they suffer so much as well. But in the end, they pull forward and they make it out alive. This game also represents the struggles we go through in life to me. Hard times are temporary. They will eventually pass us and go into our rear-end mirrors. We'll make it out, and we'll be stronger for it. Every single time I go into Creature Campaign for the last final challenge, and I hear Ray of Hope start the play, and you can call me cringe, I tear up a little bit and cry a bit, because this game also represents overcoming hardships and being able to celebrate it and become stronger for it. Ray of Hope has a lot to cover in it, from the triumph of winning to the more quiet, somewhat somber moments where you remember the hardships that you've been through and the people who may not have made it. But you're here, and this is what the game means to me. We're not even talking about the gameplay, which is also excellent. Fire Emblem 8 is the first game in the series to introduce a world map that does not suck, Gaiden, and ways for the players who are somewhat new to the game to comfortably grind until they're ready, while experienced players can immediately gun forward through the game at a brisk pace. It's the best of both worlds, and I adore the fact that this is one of the few Fire Emblem games to actually have an honest-to-God post-game. You load in, and it's no longer playing the final Doomsday music on the map. You have a triumphant remix of the main theme blasting from the speakers, and one final challenge waiting for you to clear. It's an excellent post-game with several rewards, like being able to recruit every boss and story characters that you otherwise would not have. This new run, I found myself liking even more of the cast than I had prior. This year, a friend of mine had a fun inside joke with me about Naomi, and because of that, from now on I'll probably use her every single run from now on. I even learned more about each character this time that I already liked, since each time I play the game, I slowly complete the support log more and more. This game isn't perfect, that's true, but it's one of the most important games to me as a person, and one of the things that got me into writing, drawing, and creating things. A bit of an aside, but I remember that I would, as a child, make up my own little continuation of the plot. As I played through the Lagged Out Ruins, I'd write down my own dialogue and new character plot points, and it was the beginning of my artistic streak, I think. I wish I had some of these pictures to show, but unfortunately, those are lost to time because of circumstances out of my control. This game means a lot to me, and I cannot be more thankful that it got put on one of the best handheld consoles of all time for me to have. Fire Emblem 8 is the only RPG on the Ambassador program, and it easily earns the title of the best game on it. I can sing its praises for days, and I will if you let me. Fire Emblem 8 is one of my favorite games, not just on the GBA, but one of my favorite games of all time. So if you play any of the games on this list, please make it Fire Emblem the Sacred Stones. That is all. Yeah, this is a bit of an outro, but, thanks everybody for watching. This was meant to come out last year, but things got a little bit hectic. So I hope you don't mind me starting this year with last one's finale. I got a little down by the end of last year and was having a hard time finding stuff to cover, but I think I got a lot of fun stuff planned for this year, so I hope you all enjoyed this. I cannot thank you enough for watching. This last year has been quite the journey. 2023 was kind of like my self-improvement arc as not just a creator or an artist or a writer, but as a person. I was able to pursue so much last year, and I cannot be thankful enough for the people in my life that have helped me with this. And I knew nearing the end of last year, that I had to cover the Ambassador Program list again, not just because it is an excellent thing to make a ranking on, but because it's one of my favorite videos before I started getting good at making them, so it only felt good to close off this chapter of my content creation by recovering it, and it's been a little bit of an emotional journey. being able to finally find ways to express how I feel really puts a smile on my face. Like, if you look at the old Ambassador Program video on my channel, I accidentally cut off the video at the last part when I was, like, showing my 3DS with the Ambassador Program games on it. How was I this bad at making videos back then? But if anyone, by any miracle, is still watching, not just through this whole video, but people that have watched me since I dropped that video last year, thank you. And I hope you stick with me going forward, because we're blazing this path ahead. We're going to make this year our bitch. So I hope you enjoy the ride. I've been Snake Solid, and I'll see you next time.